Arcane is a masterclass in how to lend each character importance outside of the main protagonists and antagonists. An important lesson for any writer to learn is that taking time to flesh out more minor characters and provide them with depth and meaning helps them feel just as real and human as the main characters, greatly improving one's story. There are several examples of side characters in Arcane who accomplish this feat, but there are two who I think deserve a closer look: Milo and Clagger. Although they did fulfill the role of elevating the main cast, they, just like the rest, were treated with respect and given depth. Even though their stay in Arcane wasn't the longest, they managed to have a lasting impact. Early on in the show, we can see the similarities they share with Vi and Powder, orphans raised by Vanda within the Undercity, their parents having died in what was probably a situation similar to what we saw in Arcane's opening. Due to this, it's not hard to believe that the horrors Vi and Powder were exposed to, Mylo and Claggor were also exposed to. They all suffered the same world, but they all were willing to take a stand and fight for a better life. Just like their sisters, they had potential, but due to a tragic event, we can only wonder what could have been. I found Claggor to be quite similar to Vanda, and I think would have grown to fill Vanda's shoes rather than Vi. While Vi had Vanda's confidence and fighting skill, Claggor was level-headed and thoughtful like his adoptive father. While not as skilled as his sister, Claggor was strong and brave, never wanting to resort to violence, but when he had to, was capable of being a one-man army, similar to his father. He seemed to develop Vanda's calmness, able to remain level-headed in any intense situation, like when he noticed the damaged wall and took action to knock it down. While Vi was the leader of their group, Claggor had it in him to act independently, like when he took charge to try and quell the situation with Deckard's gang. Vi may appear to be Vanda's obvious successor, but due to Claggor's size, strength, bravery, and overall calmness, I think if we were able to have seen him grow up, we would have seen him pick up the mantle Vanda would leave behind. I find it quite hard to place who Mylo would have grown to be. He wasn't a leader like Vi, and he wasn't a strong asset like Claggor. He didn't really add anything to the group. He mostly just accomplished not being a detriment, which is something he sometimes failed at, like when his mouth caused a fight to unfold between them and Deckard's group, a fight in which he barely held his own. Mylo wasn't the most useful, but he was bold and determined, always willing to fight alongside his siblings. But even though he was loyal and courageous, there was a obvious insecurity, stemming from his failure to prove himself useful. Whenever he tries, his efforts prove meaningless, like when he attempted to lockpick, but Vi just kicked down the door. The only time we saw Mylo prove helpful was when he freed Vanda. Mylo was quite similar to Powder, in the sense he just wanted to help and be seen as helpful. And I actually think it is in Milo's and Clagger's relationship with Powder we can delve deeper into who they were. Milo is cruel to Powder, but this cruelty stems from vulnerability, his fear of being unneeded. So he pushed his own insecurities onto the only person he could. Not Clagger, the big, strong member of the group, or Vi, their leader, but he went after Powder, the youngest and smallest, the easiest to pick on. Despite this, I believe Milo does recognise the potential in Powder. He sees her skill with machines, her skill with a gun, even correcting his aim to match hers, showing he does recognise she is better than him in certain aspects. Yes, while Powder's grenades don't work now, if she persists, eventually they will. Vi thinks so, and I believe Milo does too. He just denies it because he knows when Powder grows, she'll overshadow him. Because what can he offer? At that point, if anyone were to be a detriment to the team, it could only be him. So I don't think he berates Powder solely out of frustration of her shortcomings, even if that is a part of it. It's also out of jealousy, out of knowing what is to come. While we never really see Clagger interact with Powder, I disagree with the idea this means they didn't have much of a relationship. Clagger seemed to be uplifting and supportive of Powder, though this was portrayed in more subtle and less obvious ways. Like when Powder hesitates to jump, while Milo questions why she is even here, Clagger offers to help her over. When Milo and Powder are on the shooting range, Clagger teases Milo.
What's the matter, Milo? You worried Powder's gonna beat you again?
While you could just view this as a playful jab, I see it as another subtle way Clagger acts more supportive to his little sister. By pointing out her skill, acknowledging where she is more skilled than Milo. Usually, Milo points out where Powder lags behind the rest of them. Here, Clagger points out where Milo lags behind Powder. These subtle instances show his supportiveness towards his sister. He never directly goes against Milo, but I think this comes down to Clagger not enjoying confrontation. So he instead shows his support by not joining in the teasing and taking chances to tease Milo in a sort of payback to make Powder feel a bit better. A lot of who Milo and Clagger were is shown by their relationship with Powder, but after their death, it is in Jinx's memories of them which reinforce who they were. In Jinx's hideout, we see Clagger is in the form of a plushie, which I believe means she remembers him to be a comfort. His puppet even has a stitch in the shape of a smile, showing how Clagger was a positive presence, a presence who didn't advocate for violence, a presence who tried to help Powder along. He was big and strong, and while in the eyes of an enemy could be intimidating, in the eyes of, say, a little sister, he was safety, a comfort when things seem too dark, like a cuddly teddy bear. Milo's puppet is a lot more accurate in size, perhaps showing how his presence felt a lot larger to Powder, as negative ones can often feel, especially one that is constant and aggressive. Milo's effect on Powder is still present all these years later, with how his words plague Jinx, playing with her doubts and encouraging her insecurities. The negative presence Milo had in his sister's life compared to the positive presence I believe Clagger had is further shown when Jinx shoots Milo at her tea party but leaves the Clagger plushie alone. Because he doesn't anger or frustrate her. He never did. Even when Vi tries to remind her of her past and Jinx suffers those traumatizing memories, upon seeing Milo, she lifts her arms in defense because Milo has always made her feel defensive, projecting his own insecurities onto her. But when she sees Clagger, her arms go down, leaving herself more vulnerable in front of him because she trusts Clagger. He never gave her a reason to be nervous or insecure. He only ever tried to make her feel safe, like a big brother should. There is one other brief instance which gave us a closer look at these two characters, was when their haunted forms stood beside their sister as she called out for Vi. Milo is screaming out, afraid. He wants people to see him, to want him, while Clagger has a more powerful stance, standing firm, being someone you could lean on, looking up in a hopeful way, while Milo is crying out for hope. As memories, a light is shined on who Milo and Claggor were in the living. While Milo was loyal to his family, his insecurity held him back and produced negativity. Clagger was someone who thought of his siblings before himself, while Vi was the fire that led the group. Clagger was the rock who kept them steady from behind. Milo wasn't just the mean teasing guy, and Clagger wasn't just the big strong guy. They were more than that. Their characters were deeper than that. They weren't written to just die. They had potential to be something. They had the same potential as Vi, Powder, and Echo. They probably would have been important members of the Firelights, helping Echo liberate Zorn, or go to free Vi and help her stand against the power of Silco. But whatever they would have done, it would have been for the good of the Undercity, because they are the sons of Vander. Their roles may not have been as big as some others, but their presence was just as important.